Mommy, mommy, I want to learn the golden rule. So, okay, I'm making up the lyrics as I go along. It's just about 21 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock. You're inside the Now Morning Show here on TTT. I am Natalie Lagour, and joining us via phone this morning is the Minister of Education, the Honorable Neon Gatsby-Dolly, to talk about that. Will the children make it back to the classrooms? And if so, what will that look like? Good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning, Natalie. Good morning to all your listeners, viewers, everyone else on set.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, Minister, I think the question on everybody's mind is, will we see that uptake in vaccinations? Since the Prime Minister predicated the return to the classrooms on the uptake in vaccinations, and that he's left it up to the Ministry of Education to do the rolling out of the vaccines. So as Minister, what are you going to put in place to ensure that, you know, we see those children back in the classrooms?
All right. Well, first thing off, the Prime Minister will have spoken about the schools being open physically. A little while ago, he would have spoken about it again on Saturday, and he would have indicated that we are making the vaccines available, but we are also intending to have schools open. Now, of course, the vaccination program is not mandatory for children, for anyone, any citizen, and therefore it is really up to parents to decide whether their children will be vaccinated or not. However, I am not under the impression that the opening of school is predicated on the students' uptake of the vaccine, or else we would have a great uncertainty in that regard. So certainly the Prime Minister would have said that we will make the vaccine available, and we will start with our forms 4 to 6, our exam students, and that is exactly what is intended for school to open. With regards to the stakeholders and their input, we have been speaking with the stakeholders and so on, and I can tell you that method of operation is one of the recommendations coming from the stakeholders, that we start with the older students first and we see how that goes. So that is the intention with regard to opening of school. We haven't quite finished the guidelines yet. We just met at our last second round stakeholder meeting last week Friday, and so we will finish off the guidelines for the final look, but that seems to be the way we will go. And of course, the vaccination program makes it better because you can have our students better protected at school. In addition to that, with regards to the vaccination program, that is actually being rolled out by the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Education is collaborating and supporting that effort because it's open to citizens who are 12 to 18 years old. So this is just another facet of the national vaccination program. It's a different vaccine being used for this age subset, and so it really is being led by the Ministry of Health. And the Minister of Health, at his press conference today, will have some more details on how that will roll out for those younger citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
But Minister, the reason I opened to that question is that on Saturday at the press conference, I think one of the things posed to the Prime Minister was, you know, if schools, if children, if you don't have certain uptake of vaccines, if the schools are still going to be reopened, and I thought his response was they have to wait and see what that looks like.
We will have to wait and see what it looks like in terms of vaccination uptake. But if you cast your mind back to a couple of weeks ago, we would have spoken to the Prime Minister, and he would have indicated that we need to get our schools open to some extent. And I can tell you, Natalie, that is a fact. In all health and safety protocols being observed, of course, we need to get our schools open, especially for exam students. You would recall that in February of this year, we were able, thankfully, to have some of our school students come out, and those, again, were those very critical examination students who have SDAs to complete, who have practical elements that they must do. And so it is important for us to have those students out. So we will see what the vaccine uptake looks like, and of course that will influence to some extent our decisions as to exactly how we do it. But at this point in time, the intention, the sure intention is to have school open. Certainly, if we have anything that changes, because the situation is dynamic and fluid, if anything changes between this time and then, certainly, well, it will be adjusted. But that is the plan, that's what we are working with, and that's what we're aiming for. Minister, and so the vaccination schedule and everything is aimed at that.
Minister, if when schools reopen physically, if when we have the physical reopening of the classrooms, and the teachers aren't vaccinated, will we be seeing those teachers, interacting and interfacing with the children one-on-one?
So the question would be, how would we know who is vaccinated or not vaccinated? So that question is predicated on teachers or any other employees having to declare their vaccination status. At that time, if there's a decision to do that in this country, well, then the Education Ministry will certainly comply. But at this time, there is no demand for any employer to say, let me see your vaccination status. That is driven by the government. So the Ministry of Education is led by the government on these decisions. We have no such mandate at this time.
Right, and I know that there isn't any mandatory vaccination drive from the government. It's according to the Prime Minister up to Saturday, asking people to volunteer to get vaccinated. But again, if we're talking about, children, presenting in the ICU with COVID, shouldn't we then make the policy mandatory for those who have to interact at that level, get so up close and personal? Because a teacher cannot really be, separated or distant from his or her student in a physical classroom. So the question I have to ask you, shouldn't we be making it mandatory then?
Well, that's a question that I certainly cannot answer, Nancy. That's a question that needs a wider response. The Ministry of Labour would have to be involved, the Attorney General would have to be involved, and certainly it's something the Prime Minister would have to declare on. Because that would be a policy for a country. We've seen what has happened in different countries when these types of things take place, and these things come from a prime ministerial level. So you'd have seen what happened in St. Vincent, you'd have seen what's going on in France. So these are not decisions that an education minister can pronounce on.
Right.
But stakeholders have raised, of course, these are couple issues, and the stakeholders have raised issues as well. And certainly it would be something that the government would take into consideration when the time comes.
And one of the things we have to deal with as well is that whether physical or virtual classroom, is that a lot of students, and I'm going to repeat that, a lot of students are not in the system at this time, Minister. And I'm still trying to figure out what the Ministry of Education is going to try to do to get those children back into, the classrooms, back onto the learning platforms, because the reality is that a lot of them have fallen by the wayside.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, Natalie, this issue of students being in school and students participating, being engaged, as I said, it has changed in the online environment, but it is not a new issue to this country. Children have been out of the school system for a long time, and it is something that the Education Ministry is addressing. At this point in time, we have reached out both to the police and social development. We have not had the type of formalization of a policy that we would want yet. However, with the opening of the new school term, we are going to re-engage this issue. This is not something that has just been set up, but it's something that really needs to be addressed because it has affected us over the years with students just dropping out of school, students just being on the roadway when school is going on. That's an uncommon sight. But now, in the online environment, it has come to the fore, and it has really sharpened our focus on what's happening with our children who are out of school. And we need to take that in hand, and we intend to do that. So as the new term starts, that is another facet of what we need to look at and how we are planning to look at it. The first thing is to ensure that the students on the roll are the students who we are seeing in the classroom. If we are not seeing them in the classroom, then we need to reach out to parents. If we cannot reach parents, then we need assistance to get to those parents because we will have no way of finding them. So it is really a clear pathway of how to proceed, but it is not so easy to get there. Because if a parent is living somewhere you can't find a phone number, then you have to rely on somebody to help you find that parent. The Ministry of Education doesn't have investigative officers to go find them. So we have to say it really is an interagency reliance, and that is what we are formalizing at this point in time. But it is foremost in our minds that we have to assist, because with the COVID, it may have exacerbated some children's circumstances. Some students may be working at this point in time to assist based on the socioeconomic issues in the country because of the COVID and the lockdowns and so on. That's a reality we have to face, and it is something we intend to work with. So we have already started working on it, but we are intend to continue as we move forward.
Minister, the ministry had promised to deliver 20,000 devices to students. Where is the ministry with this?
We have up to last week, we got 5,000 more in that tranche. So that will take us to around 10,000 devices that came into the country. Thus far from the 20,000 because they're coming in tranches. And so we would have delivered up to last week, the last tranche that came in. And so we await another tranche this week or early next week, and we will continue to distribute as it comes.
And of course, you know, I had an interview with Tutor earlier this morning, and one of the things they keep insisting is that, you know, they're talking about not only, you know, a working environment to safeguard against COVID, but a working environment that is safe, as in the buildings and all of that. And I remember many moons ago, it's one of the issues I would have asked you about, if the ministry is using the downtime where people aren't in the classrooms to get those repairs to ensure that, you know, the classrooms are ready. Minister, just tell us what has been happening there, because I wouldn't want to know that we restart schools and we're hearing of the exact same issues that we had when schools were closed for over a year.
The school repair has been ongoing. It's an ongoing facet of the ministry. We have over 600 Portlands. So, and many of them in age conditions over 50 years old. So there's always an issue that is going to crop up at a school. So it is not as though you can say, okay, this school is done and ready, and we move on to another school. A school can be fixed now for one reason, and in 2 weeks there's something else that crops up. So that is an ongoing issue at schools. Of course, we do also have schools where the students are decanted into other buildings because the school is under construction or the school is not fit for use. That's the reality of the education landscape. So school repair is not something that you can say it's done. School repair is always ongoing, and there are always things coming up at schools. So that has not been dormant. That section of the ministry has certainly not been dormant. Schools are being repaired. Different repairs are happening at different times, and that's something that is happening every single day.
Well, I'm hoping that, you know, it's one of those issues because Tutor seems to be holding hard and fast to that one. But what are some of the other conditionalities, you know, that came out of, you know, the stakeholders meeting in terms of, you know, what they need in place for the reopening of schools?
Some of the main things, of course, the health and safety of the students and arrangements for that, the responsiveness of the health institutions when principals call, the ability of schools to have the funding that they need on time. Of course, these are not matters that are solely handled by the Ministry of Education, but it is always an issue for schools to have their funding on time. The filling of vacancies, teaching vacancies, and we met just recently with the TSC again last week, where we discussed the importance of that, and the TSC would have indicated that they have taken on board our concerns, and they were doing the teachers, the interview for teachers, where there's a dearth of persons on the order of merit list, so that we can have those vacancies filled, transfers as well to fill vacancies. So some of these are the main issues coming from the stakeholders with respect to, you know, what they want to see to be able to operate in the way that they need to for the reopening of schools. So,
and I thought a lot of these issues, Minister, would have been captured in the National Consultation on Education. But we haven't heard anything coming out of those consultations, because it seemed as if once again we're heading into another SCA, even though it seems as if it's something that most parents don't want. So what was the point of the national consultation?
Interestingly, it is not, the consultation of 2016 and the consultation of 2020 did not show that most parents want to do it with the SCA. And that's something I need to really highlight. It's almost a 50-50 in Trinidad and Tobago with respect to SDA, who wants and who does not want the SCA. But in addition to that, the other issues that came up with the consultation will form the substance of the new education policy 2021 or 2022, to 2027. And that is being formulated now. We have started pulling out different areas, the digital transformation area, and that would have led to the formation or the approval of Cabinet to form an educational technology unit at the Ministry of Education. Because one of the issues was that if we have to transformed digitally. We have to have a proper online learning system. Teachers and students are doing very well thus far with the stopgap system that is there, but an organized system with an e-classroom that you would find at tertiary institutions. That is the kind of thing we need to develop. And so to do that, we need the personnel who first and foremost, that is their job spec to do this because it takes a lot of work. That has been approved by Cabinet coming out of the consultation. That has been approved, and so we are filling now those positions at the ministry so that we actually have staff to institute that digital transformation. And there are other aspects. You have mentioned the student performance and how we ensure that all students have the opportunity, including those who would have fallen out of a system, the equity of education at the school, the quality of education and that equity at the school.
Minister, unfortunately we are out of time, but any plans to go back to the continuous assessment component to reintroduce that once rolled out properly?
That is something that will be raised with the SCA committee, that will be appointed, so that Prime Minister will have spoken to that out of the OPM, and that certainly is one of the things we'll be discussing with them, and many other ideas.
All right, Minister, we do have to leave it there. Of course, we'll check back in with you to continue the discussions as things, progress along and we see how this reopening is going to go for the physical classrooms. And we, check up on the connectivity issues. But thank you so much for speaking with us this morning.
Certainly. Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, most welcome. The Minister of Education there. So at least we learned something, the formation of to form an education technology unit at the Ministry of Education, coming out of the consultations. And 50-50, I thought it was more like 60-40 in terms of the SEA.
And that's why the consultations are important, so that you get a nice cross-section and an actual representation of what people want rather than hearsay.
Yeah, you watch that, I watch that.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get, so remember that when you watch, you see the participants, but not necessarily who are messaging behind the scenes, because people were able to send messages to say, okay, this is what we want, this is not what we want. So look at that, 50-50 for those, yeah, SEA, nay, 50-50. All right, stick around. We have much more coming up in the show here on TTT. Stay with us.